What's up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. The draft is 1 week away, and we have a very special guest on today's episode, Dane Brugler, the Athletic, author of The Beast, the most comprehensive guide to the NFL draft every year. For my money, kind enough to join us today, share a little bit of his insights from a Buffalo Bills perspective. Dane, how are you?
I'm good. It feels good that the Beast is out there and available to everybody. The feedback's been awesome. That's been really cool to hear. Hopefully people check it out. I'll go to the Athletic, and I promise you can't miss it. It's over 2,600 players this year, 400 reports. No other place has all the NFL verified testing information like this. I promise you won't be disappointed.
I was reading some commentary underneath because there's the comment section on the article, and it's amazing how many people share that they buy the book in bound form and then kind of keep it with them every year to go back and kind of have an encyclopedia of the draft. How cool is that people just have all of your work, like years of it, on the ready?
Well, and that's how I hope people will digest something like this. It's a resource guide. It's not necessarily, hey, I'm smarter than you. These are my rankings. This is how you need to think. No, I mean, like if we all see something different with these players, and if we didn't, it wouldn't be any fun to talk about. So I really love that people, while I feel good about my batting average, and they care, people care about what I have to say about the players and the analysis and the rankings and all of that. But the amount of just factual information that's in there that you can use it as a resource guide. So even when, in 4 years from now, when the Bills sign somebody in free agency, you can go back to the Beast, to the draft guide, and look up, oh, okay, so this tells me exactly what his testing information was. This tells me exactly what was thought of him coming out of college and maybe how he's changed in the NFL. And so just using it as kind of like a timeline like that is pretty cool.
Before we get into this thing, I want to take you back and talk to you about a player the Bills drafted a couple of years ago quickly, but I wanted to give you a chance, shout it out. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show. You guys got some big plans for draft coverage on day one of the draft, right, at the Athletic?
Yeah, we're going to be in Chicago doing a live show. Myself, Robert Mays, Derek Klassen, and Bruce Feldman. So I can't wait for that. It's going to be a lot of fun, pick by pick, live on YouTube. So hopefully, people, I'm sure you'll have NFL Network or ESPN on TV, but yeah, have us on your computer or device or whatever. And I think we'll provide some, different and some interesting context with some of these players, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Something's a lot of fun, I think, is kind of sometimes going back and looking at a player that, you did a lot of work on, Dalton Kincaid in the 2023 draft. There were so many different thoughts on him, and the 2 years since, it's interesting because he had this great rookie season. I felt like a great foundational year. Last year, injuries kind of affected him. They had Dawson Knox on the roster already. What have you made of Dalton Kincaid based on how you evaluated him, what you thought he could be in the league? And, tight end specifically is a position that sometimes takes a couple of years. Are you kind of still holding out hope that Kincaid can be what they drafted him to be, and maybe the guy in this offense, an offense that maybe needs the guy in it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not throwing in the towel. What you loved the most about Dalton Kincaid was obviously as a pass catcher, what the ball skills, what he did at the catch point. So strong through contact, he will go and get it. And it's been, disappointing that he hasn't been doing that more consistently. And it's something that he has in him. Obviously, he's a good enough athlete. You're not going to ask him to line up in line and be A+ blocker necessarily. That's not why they drafted him. That's not the strength of his game. But he does need to show what the strength of his game is, and that's through the air as a pass catcher. And like you said, injuries have played a part, but that's part of the NFL. And I think that's honestly just kind of to bring it back to this draft class a little bit. That's kind of the questions with Colston Loveland, who there are some similarities there. But Loveland's been banged up a lot this past season through the draft process. And so it's like, all right, Colston Loveland just by himself in a vacuum's a top 12 player in this class. But when we look at Dalton Kincaid, how injuries have affected him as he's gone his first 3 years in the league. Is that something we need to worry about with Colston Loveland? And so, tight end is usually one of those positions we don't see a ton in the first round. But sometimes, you see a guy that's worth it. And this year we'll have those guys with Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland. But Dalton Kincaid is kind of the reminder that it doesn't always go perfect. And sometimes even the guys that, you feel strongly about them as prospects, there's always something that could go wrong and maybe veer the trajectory off course.
Speaking of looking to the past to maybe glean some insight into how the Bills will approach this year's draft, I feel like they're in a spot they were kind of in the 2022 draft where they had to go in and find a starter at cornerback. Now, they traded up for Kaiir Elam, which obviously didn't work out. Luckily for them, they found Christian Benford, who's now their longtime, for the future here, going to be their starter on one side. In this class, like looking at it, I think Brandon Beane can learn a lesson from that draft that sometimes panicking and trading up when maybe another guy who you might have wanted. I mean, that was the Trent McDuffie draft, right? I think the Bills were eyeing him along with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs get aggressive. They go up and get him. How do you feel like this class stacks up at the top? And then in the range where the Bills are picking, I was talking about this on a show this week with my partner, Ryan Talbot. And one of the things we talked about is like, during the process, cornerback has not necessarily been a position that you think was going to go on a serious run in the first round. Maybe the Bills will have their pick of some nice players at 30. The closer we get, the more mocks I'm seeing, like the Trey Amoses of the world, Revel, Hairston, all maybe going before the Bills pick at 30. Do you see that necessarily being a possibility in the outcomes? And who's a player that you think would be worth trading up for if the Bills go that route again?
I would be surprised if they get wiped out at corner, but I think you're right. Like there are definitely some teams. You look at the Packers, and there are some teams maybe even behind you, like the Lions, that could move up and get one. So there's definitely some landmines there in the 20s with teams potentially going corner in that range. And this is a class where Will Johnson is going to be the top corner for a lot of teams, but he could last until the teens or even into the 20s. And aside from Travis Hunter, I should say, but then Jahjai Barron, what type of, some teams look at him as a nickel only. Some teams think he has more versatility. Trey Amos has been one of the big risers this year. Not just the process, but the entire year. He, this time last year was a backup at Alabama, barely draftable if he came out. Took advantage of that COVID year, goes to Ole Miss, outstanding ball production, puts himself higher on the draft radar. Then, it's just, okay, goes to Senior Bowl, does well there, check. Goes to the Combine, 4.43 in the 40. All right, check. And it's just every step of the process, even the pro day. I had one scout tell me it was one of the two best corner pro days he had seen this cycle with how Trey Amos performed at that Ole Miss pro day. So every step of the way, just check, check, check. And guys like that are going to be pushed up into the top 35, top 30. So it wouldn't be a surprise if Amos is kind of in that range somewhere. Maxwell Hairston, a little bit undersized. You worry about him as a tackler, but ran the 4.2. And there's some similarities to Nate Wiggins, who the Ravens drafted last year in the late first round and had an okay rookie year. Missed some time. Again, you worried about the frame, just a very lean athlete. Same thing with Hairston. You sacrifice a little bit with the tackling, needs to get better there, but the cover skills, the speed, that's why you're drafting a player like that. And so there are definitely some landmines in that late second round or the late second half of the first round where some of those playoff teams are going to be looking to get better at corner. And yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the Bills roster, they brought in Dane Jackson, but 1 year minimal money. Rasul Douglas no longer on this roster. Kaiir Elam no longer on this roster. Like there's definitely a need to develop somebody along with Benford, especially on the outside. Can they find somebody in the late first round this year? I think somebody will be there. It's just a question of who will it be, and will the Bills think highly about him enough to take him at that point?
Let me follow up on Will Johnson because, when you see that guy go at 23 in your latest mock draft, which we're going to dive into here in a minute, as a Bills media member and somebody that tracks Bills fans, I mean, that would be a guy that maybe falls into the 20s and you start thinking long and hard about trading up for him or seeing if Brandon Beane would be willing to do that. From what you're hearing around the league with the people that you talk to, what is it that's kind of dropping him back? Obviously the testing, not doing all the testing is probably baked in there somewhere, but would that be a guy that you could see some of these late like contenders looking to go up and get a guy that obviously has a pretty high ceiling based on what he did in 2023?
Yeah, and exactly. Go back to the sophomore year tape and how big of an impact Will Johnson was to a Michigan team that won the national championship. And then this year, I mean, he played well in September against Fresno State and some of these other teams. But it's the two main questions: speed and just durability. Some teams are pretty scared about just the injuries he had this past year and how that's going to affect him moving forward. And then speed's always been a question for him, even as a recruit. When he'd go to recruiting camps, that was a question for him, and just the straight line speed. And I mean, I mentioned this back in the fall, how we'll never see him run another 40-yard dash because it's not going to be good enough for him to do it. If it's a 4.49, 4.53, whatever the 40-yard dash was, he's just never going to run one of those 40s again. But that is kind of the question with him, especially teams that run a lot of man. Do we trust him to hold up on the outside versus NFL speed? That's going to be something that not every team's going to be okay with, especially in the top 25 picks, which there's a good chance he'll go somewhere in there. He could go as high as 11. Like this is just a weird draft after that second tier of players after the top 5 or so. Teams are there's such a wide range of opinions about where these guys should go. So Will Johnson could go as high as 11 to the 49ers. He could last at 23 in the Packers. Myself, depending on what the cost would be, I think that'd be tough to trade up for him with just some of those concerns. I'd rather maybe trade up 2 spots for a Trey Amos or Maxwell Harrison or one of these guys. But the Bills might see it a little bit differently than I do.
So you mentioned Trey Amos there. Harrison, who you also talk about, goes off the board at 28 in your mock draft to the Lions. So at 30 with Amos on the board, and I'm going to put a link to Dane's full 7-round mock draft in the show notes at the bottom. So go check that out. You have the Bills taking Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, which I think is super interesting because as you write in the story, you're right. They're very unsettled at the safety position right now. They have guys that can play it. Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin started last season. Cole Bishop played some down the stretch. They drafted him. But adding a first-round talent like Starks is very interesting. Take me through the thinking there. And the additional question, too, looking into the future, if they take a guy like Starks, how do you feel like he pairs skill set-wise with Bishop in that backfield?
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to go into the draft saying we have to come away with an impact safety. I don't think that's going to be necessarily the plan. But when you're picking so late in the first round, you just don't know how those first 28, 29 picks are going to play out. So you're kind of sitting there waiting. All right, well, if he were to fall to us, and this is a spot where let's take the best player. Let's obviously you're not taking a quarterback. So best player within reason. If a guy like Malachi Starks falls there and safety, I mean, Taylor Rapp's a fine player. DeMar Hamlin's a fine player. In my opinion, you can do better than both of those guys as starters. And I know they drafted Cole Bishop on day 2 last year to be that guy who's up and down in year 1, but obviously they still think highly of him. But you bring in a guy like Malachi Starks who has such versatility across the secondary. You want to play him in the box, you want to play him in the slot, you want to play him as more of a post or a single high. He can do all of that. And he's athletic, he's long, he plays confident. There's not a lot of indecision to what he does. He's got terrific ball skills. So, if he falls to that point in the first round, it's kind of like, all right, he's A+ character, A+ human. We love the tape. We love the skill set that he brings. Let's upgrade our secondary. Let's bring in a dude. For a longest time there, we thought of Buffalo Bills in the secondary. You thought of their safeties, right? And so let's get back to that. Let's add a guy like this. But again, I think you go into the draft obviously with a plan, but you just don't know how those first 20 some picks are going to play out. So I think you have to be willing to adjust and be open-minded and deviate based off of which who's going to fall to you, and maybe the best player available is someone you didn't expect to be there.
The Bills have done a ton of work on defensive tackle out of Florida State, Joshua Farmer, who you have the Bills taking with their number 56 selection in the second round. And I think a lot of Bills fans would be thrilled about this, 6'3", 305. Why did you go this direction here? And how do you see Farmer potentially fitting in with what the Bills want to add, maybe potentially next to Ed Oliver?
Well, I think that's the key, right? Is you have Ed Oliver in place. Let's add a big hulking one technique next to him who is going to help take some of that pressure off of Ed Oliver. A guy like Joshua Farmer can do that. Watch him at Florida State, and he is he has some burst, so he can be a one gap penetrator. So he's not just a strict nose or a shade, anything like that. He's a guy that can get upfield pretty quickly, but the way he's built, you like the size that he brings, the way he can take on blocks. I like the idea. I mean, right now it's like what Daquan Jones, like he's 34 years old. You've got an older defensive front in the middle next to Ed Oliver. So let's bring in a young player like this who can play multiple roles, can give us some versatility on the interior, has some power, has some quickness. There's just a lot of things I like about him as someone that is going to fill a role, but also be a little bit more than that. So with one of those 2 second-round picks, if he were available, I think that'd make a lot of sense.
How do you compare him? And you have Tyleik Williams going off the board more than 10 picks before this. So it's not like they had the pick of this. But just say in a scenario, those 2 players are available. Obviously, Williams is a much bigger, more traditional nose. How do you feel like those 2 players compare? But then also, what do you think would be a better fit scheme-wise for what the Bills want to do?
Yeah, Tyleik is. I love Tyleik Williams, and he's so good versus the run. I think he's didn't put a ton of pass rush production on film, but as a strict run defender, he's one of the best in this class. And he's 6'3", right around 330, 325. But he's so good with his hands. He's so good with his backfield vision. His ability to get off blocks, find the ball, and go make a play. That's why I don't know. I can't see him getting out of the top 50 because he is just so impactful against the run, and coaches are going to be all over him. So somewhere, I don't think he sneaks into the first round, but say somewhere between 35 and 50, I think is a sweet spot for Tyleik.
All right, so the 3rd pick in the draft, and this is going to be an important one for the Bills. I mean, getting 3 players in the top 65, I think you give yourself 3 chances to find a player with starting caliber potential. You went safety in the first round, so you come back with the corner at 62. Siobhan Rall Jr. out of East Carolina. This is one of the most intriguing prospects I've read up on because the range of outcomes for him in the draft coming off this injury seems to be so wide. I've seen him mocked a ton to the Vikings at 23 in the first round. You have him going here at 62. Talk about those range and where he kind of entered for you going into the season in terms of where he can go in the draft and where you have him going now.
Yeah, in my August top 50, way too early top 50. I mean, he was top 15. And that's he had a great 2023 season at East Carolina. And I mean, you have to go back further than that. He's one of the best stories. If you want to read the whole story, good reason to have the beast because it's all laid out in there. But I mean, he was injured in high school, didn't have the grades, so he goes to JUCO level. That was during COVID, so 2020, 2021, didn't have the season. And so he's working at an Amazon fulfillment center overnight just to make ends meet. And he works a 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. And a few hours later, he's in the car going to East Carolina for a tryout and just blew the coaches away. So is able to get a scholarship and it has this amazing 2023 season that puts him on the NFL radar. And he had other schools. I mean, Alabama wanted him, Penn State wanted him, LSU won. We're talking $500,000 NIL deals. He stays loyal to ECU. And unfortunately, ACL injury that's in this past September, misses the entire year, which is just how much adversity can one guy take. But talking to him throughout the process, he's unfazed. Like the football is my future. This is just another hurdle. I'll get past it. So he has the right mindset. It's just obviously a guy coming off an injury like that. You don't have the testing information, but he's a high level athlete. He's bigger. I mean, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. So he's a bigger corner. And I mean, he could easily sneak into the top 40 because you think of the upside and where he could be if he stays healthy. And you got an impact outside corner. But if teams are maybe scared off by the injury a little bit and he were to slip towards the end of the second round, the Bills, I mean, I think ideally you want someone that's going to hit the ground running from day one. He's supposed to be cleared sometime during the summer, so he will be ready for camp in some way. But, maybe there's a little more uncertainty about just how early he'll be a contributor for a team that's, the Bills, they're a playoff contender every year. So maybe that's not ideal, but it'd be hard to pass on him if you're, Brandon Beane in this front office, a guy that has that much potential, that much upside. It's just you have to eat your vegetables a little bit early with him. But I think the payoff's worth it.
How many? I want to ask you two-part question. How many first-round grades do you have coming off of your evaluations? And then from hearing talks around the league, how many, like, what's the consistent number you hear of teams and how many first round grades they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's under 15. For me, I think it was right around 13 maybe. I think it was 13. Yeah. So not many. I mean, usually it's more like 18 or hopefully 20, something like that. Like usually that drop off, is right around the playoff teams. And so picking 21, 22, you're like, all right, well, there's a drop off here. This year, it comes much quicker. And honestly, I think there's even a bigger drop off. Like there's the top tier, which is Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. And then I think you could probably throw Ashton Genty in there, but then there's a drop off. And I love Mason Graham as a player, but I think of a top tier in the draft as Quinnen Williams in terms of that type of defensive tackle. I love Mason Graham, but he's not Quinnen Williams. So, it's just that next tier, the teams picking 8, 9, 10. Like, I don't think you are getting a top 10 prospect relative to other years where, Micah Parsons was not even a top 10 pick, or, a lot of times, a lot of years, you feel like you're getting a top 10 caliber player at pick 9, 10, 11. This year, it's just not like that. There's a lot more risk involved. You're getting maybe a lower ceiling type of player, but, still a good football player. It's just how this draft is. But the depth is really good. I think, if you're the Bills in the late first round, they have 2 second-round picks. Like, this is a good year to have multiple round 2 picks, because you feel like they're starters, guys that can come in, contribute, and even going into 3rd round, 4th round, feeling like you're getting good starters in this class, even if it's not sky high. It's not the high end isn't really impressive, but you're getting quality starters that you can fill out your roster.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of like trade back scenarios, like, because they did that last year with Keon Coleman, a lot of criticism about like the potential taking Xavier Worthy. That situation aside, this year's setting up interestingly enough because of the quarterback situation, right? Like you could be getting to the end of the first round and a team maybe getting antsy, wanting to get back in, maybe get a 5th round option on a guy. Do you feel like in those scenarios over the years that hikes up the price a little bit for a team maybe trying to get in and maybe because the Bills don't have a 3rd round pick right now. And I think adding one of those to slide back 3 or 4 picks would be ideal, especially if the amount of first round grades or even fringe first round grades have been depleted by 30.
And honestly, I can't wait to see if we see fewer trades or more trades, because there's just such a, if picks 12 to 50 are all kind of like the same grades or similar grades, does that mean we're going to see more trades or less trades? Because teams will be more willing to move back, maybe not at a premium price. I think, the best case scenario, if the Bills do want to move back, is we only have 1, maybe 2 quarterbacks go top 25. And then you've got teams like the Browns and the Giants, the Saints, who might be looking to get back into that first round and get one of those quarterbacks, whether it's Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, whoever it is. Maybe that's the best case scenario, that the Browns, they pick at 33 and they also have 2 third rounders, so maybe that's you try to sell that. The Browns looking to answer the quarterback, not having to do it at 2, but maybe they can get that guy later in the first round. That's certainly a possibility, a scenario you could see playing out.
Just a couple more for you quickly. Wide receivers, the Bills on their top 30 visits have brought in speed, especially some of those day 3 targets. The one that kind of highlights the list, Isaiah Bond, with obviously everything going on off the field. Jalen Royals, also a fun name out of Utah State. Is there a day 3 or even day 2 name or 2 that you really like with a speed component that can maybe fit into this wide receiver room for the Bills, who have kind of a different flair? I mean, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel. I mean, you got a bunch of different types in there.
Yeah, and I kind of did that in my mock draft for them. In the 4th round, I had them going Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech, he's all about the speed. That's what he does. He can be a return man. He can help you out on offense. A little bit undersized, but he's a guy that can win one-on-one. I think he has enough juice where he can defeat press. So you want to play him as more of a Z, he can do that. But you get him a little bit of a runway, whether it's vertically or some of the overs, some of the under routes. You can really do some things with him with the ball in his hands. And so Jalen Lane was definitely one of those names that stood out. And yeah, I mean, you brought up Isaiah Bond, and that's that's someone I kind of fear would be a perfect match for them. Maybe late third if they traded back into the third round, or maybe we're able to get him on the fourth round. But now with the stuff going on, I don't even know if he gets drafted at this point. It's whether we don't know enough of the details to really speak on it. But regardless, it's just not good timing for anybody, for teams to fully vet the situation and know what they are drafting with a player like this. So yeah, there's a reason he was on so many 30 visits. Teams don't know what to think with Isaiah Bond, and just trying to do more homework and figure him out. And then this latest situation it's going to be tough for a team to take him in the first 5 rounds, if at all.
Obviously, we're in Buffalo here. University of Buffalo standout Sean Dolak, All-American, not invited to the Combine. I've been kind of scouring through a bunch of draft analysts. Yourself, Lance Zierlein, both have UDFA grades on him. What kind of went into that? Because I think that there's a lot of people that have followed his career, watched him locally, that do think that he's a draftable player. What kind of led him in that bucket for you?
Being undersized, that's something that's going to work against him. Obviously, you love the production. What he did this year, being a consensus All-American, as productive as he was, not just even as a tackler, but 5 interceptions. He had almost 20 tackles for loss. I mean, he was productive in a lot of different ways. The lack of size, the lack of length, it will limit him. There's just not many linebackers his size with 30-inch arms who are making a real impact on Sundays. Now, do I think he can make a roster and find a role? Absolutely. I mean, you can watch his college film and see a path where he makes an NFL roster, probably primarily on special teams, especially the way he tested, running a 4.6. He has the speed to do it. So if Sean Dolak's on a roster to begin the season, won't be surprised at all. I just think teams are going to look at him as more of maybe a late rounder, but someone else that will try to sign in free agency as well.
And last quick one, 30 seconds. Syracuse prospects. Who's the first one to go off the board? And who do you like from this class, Syracuse-wise, that you think is going to have the best NFL career?
I really like LaQuinn Allen. It's just like a third down back, a guy that can help you in pass protection, help you as a pass catcher. There's so many running backs in this class, but he's going to get lost a little bit. But for a team looking for a third down back, he makes a lot of sense. And then I'm fascinated to see where Kyle McCord goes. Where does he stack up in those quarterbacks? Like I said, with those 5 quarterbacks at the top, somewhere in the top 50. And then who's the next quarterback? Is it Ewers? Is it Will Howard? Could it be Kyle McCord? I can't wait to see where he lands, whether it's 3rd round, 4th round. Hopefully it's a spot where, he has a path to at least compete for a starting job.
Amazing stuff. Dane Brugler, hard at work at The Athletic, probably your busiest week of the year. Is this your busiest week of the year? Media-wise?
Me doing these types of, the interviews and podcasts and stuff, definitely, I try not to do it I can't do as many in March because I'm working on the Beast and all that. So now I get a chance to talk about it, and it's fun to talk about. So, I appreciate you having me on, appreciate, Bills fans are so awesome on Twitter and interacting with them and with the draft. And so it's fun to talk about their team.
Awesome stuff. Go check out the Beast, the mock draft, everything over at The Athletic. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see everybody Saturday night at Wingnut, 6 p.m. live draft pre-show. Take care, everybody.